Okay, today I'm here with Ben Bydalek. He's a Vietnam War combat veteran, decorated for his service, and we're here at the Veterans Memorial Center, Brevard Veterans Memorial Center, and the date is March 19th, 2024. And we'd like to thank Ben for allowing us, giving us his time and to tell his story. We highly appreciate it. Ben, where were you born?
I was born in Bradley, Illinois.
Okay, and as far as your parents, did both of them work?
I had somewhat of a
Go ahead, sir.
fractured childhood. Yes, my mother and father, yes, they did both work, yes.
Both of them worked, huh?
Yes.
And let's, as far as your, what were your parents' feelings about? Now, were you drafted, Ben, or did you join?
I joined the Marine Corps. However, during that Vietnam era, with the draft, many chose the service they were going to go into, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Navy. Had we not made those decisions, we would have possibly been draftees also. So yes, I joined the Marine Corps. Whether I would have joined the Marine Corps had there not been a draft, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But it was my encouragement to join the Marine Corps.
And was it like you wanted to be one of the few, the proud? Is that, or it's just based on your personality, you thought that Corps would be the...
My personality, I played varsity football for 2 years in high school. I was a defensive end with some recognition, and our coach was a Marine, and he had the locker room with posters, Marine Corps posters.
Mm-hmm.
He was a World War II Marine. Mm-hmm. We did not find out till later that he had hit every Pacific island except Iwo Jima. Mm-hmm. And virtually every one of us on the varsity football team that went into the military went into the Marine Corps. Okay. We had that encouragement, I guess.
So so you must have had like respect for him, and you know he was kind of like, really, was he like really? I know. Did you do any other sports?
Initially, I did. I found out that I enjoyed football to the better than the other sports, so I focused on football.
Okay. But as far as a coach, you just related to him pretty well, huh?
Our coach was outstanding. He was a good guy. He was our driver's ed teacher, and our driver's ed would be taking him to the mall so he could get a haircut, and we roamed around. We would sit at the front table at lunch, and when he was monitor of the lunchroom, all the girls coming out, oh, you don't really want to eat that. You don't really want your bread. Give it to, And we would sit there and we would eat like kings. So we enjoyed him. We won first year we were involved in a conference. We won that conference when we were not to win a game. And he attributed much of it to our ability to stay on the field when other teams would run out of energy.
Oh, wow.
And it had to do with our training, our physical training.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't realize at the time that it was happening how difficult it was, what he was putting us through. However, when I did get in the Marine Corps almost mirrored what we were doing for football practice. Side straddle hops and push-ups and, sprints and, hey, this is a piece of cake now.
So it really, Ben, it really helped making that transition, at least through basic. I mean, I know actual combat's a little different, but it really helped, right?
Knowing I went in on the delay program, 120-day delay program, knowing I was going to go in, and the image that the Marine Corps had, I knew I had to really get in shape. So during that time period, I worked out quite a bit, and when I did get to boot camp, I sailed through the physical part of it. It was not difficult for me.
I know, Ben, back in, I went in the beginning of '73, and we had a drop rate of like 15%. What was your drop rate in the Marine Corps?
Well, I processed through Chicago, Illinois, and I processed through a facility, a large facility, and it had a gym, and we were in the gym, and we were in the bleachers. Across the gym were other guys in bleachers. Some of those individuals were motioned to go into a door on their side of the gym. Later, we were directed to go through a door on our side of the gym. And when we went in that door, the room went across the gym, so the other fellows were already standing, and we fell in behind them. Marine got up and he said, you Army draftees up front, you are now in the United States Marine Corps. And that didn't go well with many of those young men. And I will say that a number of those went into what the Marine Corps calls a motivational platoon. They couldn't hack it up front. They went into a motivational platoon. Now, some of them did rejoin platoons. It wasn't the same unit because we had moved on. Many of them did get out with general discharges because they could not do it. So, but I would say of the enlistees that went in the Marine Corps, I'm not sure, there was probably a dropout rate, but it was minimal. But in regards to the overall during the draft. In '66, there was a good percentage.
A good percentage. Now, as far as, did you have any brothers and sisters?
I did not.
Okay. So let's go back with your parents. How did they feel about you joining? I mean, they've been aware, they know that Vietnam is starting to get really hot.
My father, Chanute Army Air Corps Base, was close to my hometown. And there were different functions that the town would do for the soldiers. And my mother became involved with one of the young men down there, and she became pregnant. And shortly after that, he was killed in an air accident at Chanute. So they didn't have the opportunity to get married, and I didn't get to know my father.
Oh.
She did marry a man that was in the Navy, World War II. He was badly injured, and he had some psychological issues. And my mother, what I can reference in regards to my family, my mother worked in the Joliet Army ammunition plant. She saw the World War II. She saw the horrors of that. Our little town built a memorial to all those that had died, and it was a little town. She went through Korea. Okay? She saw what happened there in another war. Vietnam, and her only son enlists in the Marine Corps. You don't have to go. I can get you out. Your sole surviving son. Oh, I would have nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. Some months later, when I was wounded, do you want us to notify your family? No. Not my mother, not my wife. No, you know. And I had to write home. I didn't know that who's going to believe the military is going to do what you ask. And I had to write this ambiguous letter. If you get something, just disregard it. Don't pay attention to it. You know, didn't really happen. So, but here, it wasn't until, my goodness, I was in my 40s that I realized what my mother must have been going through. World War II, Korea, a son, her only son, in Vietnam. Now, she doesn't hear about it in the newspaper. She's watching it on TV. Okay? And that's where her son's at. It had to be, she was one hell of a woman.
You, Ben, you were pretty close, huh?
No, not at all.
You weren't close with your mom?
We weren't close through, I graduated 8th grade, and that was the end of my relationship with my mother. And it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I finally accepted the fact that, Mom, you were a single mother in the 40s. I couldn't be born in the hospital because it was a Catholic hospital. If you weren't married, you couldn't have a baby in the hospital, so I was born in my grandfather's basement. And she had to work, and she worked. So
Just never really was able, because of those, to develop a relationship.
Until in the 40s that I realized what her life must have been like, especially with me in the military. And so I made that connection, and then it was good until she passed away. But it took, it took from 8th grade to my early 40s to finally mature enough to realize what it must have been like for her.
Thanks, Ben. So, Ben, did you eventually graduate from high school, or did you get a GED, or was it?
Oh, no, I graduated.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
And before, did you go to the service right after high school?
No, I graduated in '64, and I got to have one of those wonderful summers of scuba diving and drag racing and chasing girls
Mm-hmm.
and drinking too much beer
Mm-hmm.
with three of my dear friends
Mm-hmm.
before I went into the military.
How many years? Or just a summer?
Summer of
A summer.
'65,
And-
April of '66 is when I was actually in the Marine Corps.
And I remember when you gave myself and Joe and Karen a tour, were those buddies, did they eventually go into the Corps? Because I know you showed.
One enlisted in the Army, and Bob, 2 weeks in country with the 101st Airborne. Bob had passed away. The other dear friend, Al, that I grew up with from being a toddler, he died in 2013 of Agent Orange lung cancer. And Mike, who came over with his baseball glove and bat at age 13, just moved in the neighborhood and asked if he could play baseball. Mike had just sold his business that land it was on, became a millionaire, and didn't live 2 years because of Agent Orange soft tissue cancer. But those were the other three.
And Ben, I remember from our previous conversation, you this Agent Orange, you've been impacted, right? So.
Agent Orange is the Vietnam veterans' nemesis. We lost 58,000 names on that wall, but we've lost over 400,000 to Agent Orange. It's something that America is totally unaware of. Myself, I have lost a major organ, and I have kidney and liver issues, and I monitor them yearly, and I just yesterday got the results of this year, and they want additional MRI and blood work done because there's some issues now.
Sorry to hear
So it is, if you're looking at a Vietnam veteran, 2,000,007 that actually had boots on the ground, he was exposed to Agent Orange. Yeah.
Thank you. You had your high school diploma, you could have worked. Was there did you just really want to go in the service and serve? Was that it?
Unless you have been involved in a draft, especially at a young age, 18, you don't realize that the weight of that draft being out there.
Okay.
But the other part of that is, I was of a generation where fathers had been in World War II. I was of a generation where 4th of July parades, Veterans Day parades were a mile long, big floats, bands, costumes, flags, patriotism from an early age. Then you grow a little older and you're watching John Wayne on Iwo Jima, and you're seeing the battles and the victories, and you have this, it's ingrained in you, this patriotism and country, so you don't question it. My generation didn't question it. It was our duty. If it was out there, and something's going on, yes, there's a draft, but it's also a duty.
And so by that time, the media, the news and all that, that was right at the beginning when it started to really, the negative stuff about,
Yeah, that happened way before that.
Oh, it did?
That was around 68. He went in 65.
Well,
The
this
war
is
was going fine in
Yeah,
65.
Okay.
the until General Westmoreland and President Johnson, a month before Tet, proclaimed to the country that we had won the war and that the North Vietnamese could not put up any kind of a battle. And then Tet hit January 31st, 1968. Up to that point, if you were seeing a soldier on TV fighting, he was a good guy, there for a reason, there for a cause. After the Tet Offensive, that same guy fighting, doing the same thing, was now questionable. Why are we there? And then in 1971, when we started withdrawing, things took on a different flavor again. And we had been involved in the protests and the hippies, and they were being drafted, and they were coming over, and that was the third era in Vietnam. But I was involved in the first era when we were still good guys.
Okay. And your initial point of entry, Ben, is in Chicago?
I was inducted in Chicago, and I boarded a plane headed for Paris Island. And Paris Island, because of a new enlistment program that the Marine Corps came out with, and because of recruiting draftees and needing people, Paris Island was full, and our plane was diverted to San Diego, and I went through boot camp at Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego.
Okay.
I am what is commonly known as a Hollywood Marine.
Okay.
Did I say that loud enough?
So you went to San Diego, and for your boot camp, and I believe it is was it 9 or 10 weeks or longer?
12 weeks.
12 weeks.
12
Okay.
weeks.
And then you kind of touched on it. Being in the Marine Corps, at least the physical part, you were ready for it. Were you ready for the mental, the transition into military? Were you ready for that?
That's one thing about Marine Corps boot camp and Marine Corps DIs. It's very similar to taking off that first step of the plane in Vietnam. Your transition is immediately without option. And so you got off that bus from the airport, you put your feet on those yellow footprints, and your civilian life was over. And you didn't adapt to it. You just were, and without option. So I was relatively inconspicuous in the platoon. My height put me in the middle. The two fellows I went in with on the buddy plan, they were both taller. They got to be squad leaders and beat up because of it. They couldn't column right, column left, so they got beat up and then sent back. But I was in the middle. I didn't create any waves until the rifle range. And
Was that your first? Was that? We're still in boot camp.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
And a rifle range for a Marine is pretty, given the time, it's pretty important, right?
Oh, it's intense. You don't graduate Marine Corps boot camp if you don't qualify with a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I overqualified. I shot high man in the platoon, and 2 rounds from being high man in a company of over 300, and that put me on the scale.
And is a company or a platoon, is it like 75?
60 plus, yes.
60 plus, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Did that like give you, was it the DIs easier on you, that is a crack marksman?
Well, the company senior NCO put it on the table that anyone that meet or beat his score, which was a high score, that he would buy them a beer. And I duplicated his score. Actually, I beat it, but I duplicated it.
Yeah.
I was not a chance in hell I was going to beat it.
Yeah.
But I duplicated it.
Mm-hmm.
And we get off of the rifle range, and I'm called to the front. We had what was Quonset huts, the metal buildings from World War II. I was called to the front, and there he stood. And he walked me across this little parade deck and says, "Unbutton your collar." I unbuttoned my collar, and we walked in the NCO club up to the bar. He bought me a beer, didn't say a word, had a lot of looks though, and walked me back, and that was it.
Okay.
And the next thing, the DIs called me into the hooch, and boy, they were up and down me. "Where'd you learn to shoot?" And da-da-da-da, you know, and they were intent on sending me to sniper school. It would have taken another year in my enlistment to go through the training and still be able to do a tour of duty. And I had gotten married. I was engaged at the time, and I chose not to do it, and it didn't put me in good standing.
Okay. So after basic, where did you go to any type of training or schools?
We were sent to Mike went to the air wing. He had put in for jet mechanic. Bill and I ended up in Schools Battalion driving. We trained on we qualified on deuce and a half, the 5-ton, the Mighty Mite, which was the Marine Corps version of the Jeep. And that was our MOS when we went to Vietnam. Was we had a truck driving license, and that lasted about a half a day after we got in country.
Okay. After training, so how long was the transportation? How long was that?
You know, I don't recall exactly how long the Schools Battalion was. We, from Schools Battalion, went through advanced infantry training. From that, we came home on leave. We reported back to Camp Pendleton for what was called Staging Battalion. And that was more intense, going through vills and such, stateside, supposedly getting acclimated to what a tour of duty was like. Both advanced infantry training and Schools Battalion were so far off the mark.
Really?
They,
It's like taking
no.
It's like in college, you train to be like an accountant or a teacher, and when you get to it doesn't.
You
Very
get to the
little.
real
Yeah,
world,
yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't reflect what it does is it gives you qualifications to enter the field.
Yeah.
And what it did in regards to us and the rest of the young men during that time, we learned to take orders,
Okay.
and we became part of something larger than us, and a friend structure,
Yep.
other than at home. And we learned to take orders and to do as we were directed.
Okay.
And that was the main thing. It was
Um,
taking orders.
did you receive any promotions during that time? Or no?
I was fortunate because I was high man in the platoon. I made private first class out of boot camp. Got a nice award.
Mm-hmm.
Was in Marine Corps magazine.
Mm-hmm.
When I got to country, I received my second promotion, which was to Lance Corporal.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's E. What? That would be E.
E3.
E3.
And just under a year, I received a promotion to Corporal, E4. So as many found, promotions were quick to come by during a war.
Okay.
Because if there were a position that needed to be filled, many times when it was filled and it was for a higher rank, you received the ranking that went with that
Right.
particular MOS or responsibility.
Okay. So before we get in, Ben, to when you went, went to your first duty station, what was the hardest part of your basic training and your specialized training? Was from you coming into the military, what was the hardest part?
I don't recall
Being
from Chicago to stepping off of that plane in Vietnam. I really don't recall anything that was
Probably.
extremely hard or
Okay.
difficult.
So, in the same time, conversely, was it anything really easy, or no? Like this is a piece of cake that.
Because I prepared myself physically and I knew mentally that the Marine Corps was going to be challenging. I got through it. I prepared myself, and it was not difficult for me.
Okay.
And I believe many of the Marines that enlisted knew they were going to go in, that prepared themselves mentally. You're already prepared mentally.
Yeah.
Because you've heard all the rumors
Yeah.
and you've seen the movies, you
Yeah.
know, and go John Wayne. So you're already kind of gung ho,
Mhm.
you know, to enter the Marine Corps.
Mhm.
You don't just wake up one day and say, "Oh hell, I think I'll join the Marine Corps." No, so
you get out of training, and then you go on leave, and then where did you go? Your first duty station?
my first duty station was Vietnam.
Vietnam.
And I hit country on a afternoon.
Mhm.
It was early. This was October of 1966. The airstrip wasn't completely finished. Our receiving area was tents by the airstrip. The next morning, we received our duty assignments, and Bill received something, and I received something, and they're not the same. We're on the buddy plan. It's not the same. Sorry about that, fellas. But you know, and I asked, what's a D-211? You know, and 105 artillery. I thought to myself, shit, you got this all wrong. I'm a truck driver.
Yeah.
I'm picking these guys up at the plane and bringing them over here.
Yeah.
You're sending me to an artillery battery? I know nothing about artillery. So that afternoon, the Marine Corps was kind enough to schedule a helicopter just for me to take me from Da Nang down towards Chu Lai and drop me off at this D-211 105 artillery battery. Okay.
So it was OJT?
Oh yes, the whole, it was.
Did you find it really complicated?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all. And you say complicated, and I realize really the simplicity of it. I got to the unit, was issued a weapon, and they needed someone to go on the outpost at night, and that new guy is the one that goes out there. You go out there, and it's just all OJT. Here's a phone, it's connected here, it's connected to the guy next to you, and back in the area, and you do a little thing.
You make your rounds?
And no,
No?
that you stood in a sandbag outpost, and then during the night, someone from inside the area would come and make sure that, you know, they had a job to do too.
Yeah.
So, but I went from being a truck driver to being a grunt. You're doing grunt stuff out there in the OP, and there is something that's called a listening post, an LP, where you go out about 50, 60 yards and you lay in the grass with a phone and listen. And if you hear something, you let them know back here. And then you moved, and you might be in an area where there's a ville, and you have to do patrols through that ville and check it. You do it yourself. The grunts, the true grunts, they were out there fighting in the valley. 105s are there to cover those guys when they get in trouble and they get on the phone, call in the artillery. That's what we're there for.
I see.
And so we were our own grunts, but when you left the perimeter and you came back, if there was a fire mission and somebody was short, one of the guns was short, you went and fulfilled a duty on that gun. And once you were out on the OP and you were on the gun, then you got to do what your original job. So I was a grunt, I was a cannon cocker. I eventually became the mechanic for the battery, which we had 10 trucks, 6 to tow the guns, 4 for ammunition, and one guy to keep them all going.
So how long, Ben, were you in Vietnam?
I was in Vietnam for 13 months.
And of that time, is there like some memories, a memory or memories that stand out, that, you know, exemplified, or, you know, it of your experience? Is there, like, as far as that had the most impact on you? Was there any particular experiences?
There were 3 events. Friday the 13th, January 1967, we were hit. They tried to overrun us. We killed 16 and captured 4. The next morning, one of the engineered trucks right in front of the OP, we kept those OPs. We didn't stop in the morning and come back. We kept them occupied. And one of the engineered trucks hit an explosive that was sitting on the road and killed 2 of the Marines. And they were brought back into the area. The other 16 were out there in the 4, and so that whole experience, and then it, because we were artillery, and because we were so devastating, we were always the focal point of attacks, and primarily mortar attacks.
Were you behind the line, or were you?
The maximum range of a 105 artillery piece is 8 miles. Traditionally, we're much closer than that. Okay, and so we were a prime target because we were so devastating. And so we would, on a frequent basis, get mortared. In fact, and tried to get overrun. In 1969, the battery was actually overrun. Our corpsman received the Medal of Honor in '69. So we were always looked at as they needed to do what they could to disturb us.
Yeah.
And so
The first thing that first experience then, was that, what made it stand out in your mind? Was that the first time that you really saw casualties? And
yes, that's January. I got there in October. Yes.
Because you'd had motors and you'd seen action, you just hadn't.
No, we had not to that point. Okay, that was the first action that we'd actually.
At that
seen.
point, Ben, it was like, this happens to other people. We're good. We have a base. Did you think that bad things happen to other people? They don't really.
Frankly, it's all matter of fact. People, when I talk about Vietnam, they ask, I don't know how you did it. I don't know how you could have done it, and such. And my answer to that is it's really, really quite simple. They didn't give me a return ticket. I had no option. There was nowhere to go, nothing to do. So you were there. You adapted to whatever the circumstances were. You knew, and it was at that point that I began that retreat in my mind as to locking things out, putting them in somewhere, because I couldn't go on the next hour if I didn't. I couldn't go on the next day if I didn't.
So you got methodical about things,
That's probably an appropriate word. We moved out of that area.
After January,
We moved out on 3 May of 1967. We moved to an area called Tam Key. And it's never Tam Key, the city, because the city is there on the coast. Tam Key happens to be a reference point if you're going inland towards the border. And so you just reference that. It wasn't Tam Key, it was away from Tam Key, but we moved into Tam Key. We moved in,
Border with Laos.
yes, we moved in late afternoon. And our artillery pieces are such that you can strap them together, and they can be heli lifted by a helicopter out to another point. To tow them up to Tam-Key, the trails had to be put in. We got them there. They got strapped. We got there mid-afternoon, and early that next morning, we got there mid-afternoon. It's a hot day. It always was hot. And I chose to lay under a truck in the shade. There always seemed to be some breeze if you could get in some shade. While a friend of mine, this is during chow, and a friend of mine put up a lean-to. And then that evening, we just pulled into the area. So they designated different Marines that would walk the compound each in 2-hour shifts as a guard. We just pulled in. There was no perimeter guard set up. And we were finished and started to set up my cot, and Ski says, "Hey, put it under here," and the lean-to. And I felt guilty about not helping him set this up. And I said, "No, I'm going to sleep out here under the stars." Can never forget that comment, that statement. And he pulled guard duty. He was, I think, PFC. And corporal, I didn't pull that kind of duty any longer. And Ski had, it was his time to go around, and he made one circle around, and he sat down, and which was close to me, about me to you. And just when he sat down, the first mortar hit, and the first mortar killed him, and it wounded me. And the second one landed right behind a friend of mine, about the same distance, only he was laying crossways, and wounded Frank pretty badly. And so I grabbed Ski, I called for the corpsman, and then the night proceeded. And well, where do I want to go with that? Ski was not getting along with his mother. Hadn't talked with her. She wrote the CO and said they were fighting and that they hadn't been talking, and wanted to know if he had said anything regarding her. The CO called me in, asked me, and I stated that he talked mostly about his uncle, aunt and uncle, who were raising him towards the end, and his brothers and sisters. But he didn't say anything badly about her. He didn't speak. I was also, a couple days later, called in, and I flew into Da Nang, and I saw Frank in the hospital. Frank was there for about 3 weeks, and I went to the morgue to identify Ski's body. And so I had this relationship there, and it was 18 years before I could get a hold of his family. And actually talk with his mother, his brothers and sisters. His mother asked me the same things as she did in that letter that she sent.
Wow.
She sent me a Christmas card stating the same circumstances. This woman was tormented by that fact. 18 years, get a hold of them. During my subsequent conversations with his one of his brothers, it was mentioned that his girlfriend at the time had brought a young lady over to the family, and this young lady was 13, and that it was their niece and nephews and cousins, and that she was pregnant at the time he went to Vietnam, and the family had not known. She had not gone to his services, and she had not notified him that she was pregnant. The young lady was born 6 weeks after he died. The family had lost contact with her, and it was 51 years before I actually contacted this young lady. And we met her 4 years ago or so, and the young lady has since become my fourth daughter.
Oh, wow.
She knew no one that knew her father, and I was able to fill in quite a gap.
Oh, great.
And actually become family.
Great.
And she has been here 2 years when we've had the Vietnam Wall at Wickham Park, and she has carried out the panel with her father's name on it.
Oh, wow.
Last August, her and her husband were here and visited the exhibit, and I have an area that I have dedicated to ski, and I had 4 people there that I was giving a tour to.
Great.
And her husband were there, and I actually got to introduce her.
Wow.
And it was surprising. It was a cathartic moment for me. And this is the young lady.
Joe, could you? You're probably better than I am. And her name?
Raise it up a
Kimberly.
little bit. Raise it up a little bit.
Yeah, Ray, thank you, sir. And what was her name?
Kimberly.
Kimberly. Oh, wow. She seems like a nice lady. Very nice lady.
And
Oh, wow.
that display behind her is her father and her father's picture, and it's also the news article when we met her for the first time. It was in Branson, Missouri, during their Veterans Week, and the newspaper did a nice article on us.
Wow. All right, and that, Ben, that was, so that was,
Any other?
that was number 2, right? That was the second, all right, the,
Yeah, that's about to cut it.
Yes,
Can we
the
stop?
second.
Can we
Stop.
stop?
okay.
My epiphany in country came in late May, early June of '67. They called the 5th Marines in from the field, and they introduced the M16 to all of us, those of us in artillery and the grunts. And they just had so many of the weapons that they issued them to the grunts. They did not issue them to artillery. We kept our M14s. And a couple weeks later, there are these helicopters coming in, sometimes 2 or 3 at the same time, and people running out to them. And it was, I didn't know what the activity was over there. And so I went over, and I found that eventually there were 32 Marines that had died in a hot landing zone
Mm-hmm.
because of weapons failure. And they had a wooden crate putting the weapons in, and I got to see those weapons and all kinds of disassembly. And I saw a young man that was a kind of a big guy, and he had blonde hair, and he just had his arms over his chest, and he didn't have a visible wound.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked like a fella I played football with, Kraut, German fella.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, at that point, from getting there in October of '66 to late May, that I had seen enough that I realized that all the Vietnamese in this country aren't worth that one man's life, that one Marine life. I said that. I said that in my mind. And I went from being the patriotic American that was over there for duty, God, and country, to making certain that I got the hell out of there alive.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that's
The
where it went.
epiphany.
It was just, you did your duty, you did what you had, but your focus was on getting there, out of there alive.
Mm-hmm.
And
So this is what months was this?
late May, early June
Late May, early June
of '67.
of '67, and how much longer did you go, Ben, before you left?
I went till November 26th of that year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be darned if the first mortar on another mortar barrage didn't land right in front of me, blew the sea bags over, ripped the end of my tent out just above my head. And 54 days, come on, you know? So,
And that was number 3, the most.
yeah.
So, Ben, do you recall the day? Was that the day that you were leaving that happened, or?
Oh, no, that was 54 days before I
Okay,
left country.
and then so do you recall the day you left?
I do. We were, because I was in charge of the motor pool, which really didn't exist, I had a little Mighty Mite that was assigned to me. And so I got my orders from out, kind of in the boonies, to go back to Battalion to rotate. So I am a salty dude at by this time, okay? So I drive my Mighty Mite back, and I don't, I was in Hoi An, which I had no idea where Hoi An was at, which is now a major tourist town. And I had no idea in relationship to Da Nang, because I'm out here, but I'm going to make sure when my orders come that I'm getting from here to here. So how do I do that? I jack the front of that Mighty Mite up, I take the tire and the hub assembly off, I leave it. And here the gunny, who was he was a strange dude. Hey, put that together, the CO needs that. Sorry, Gunny, missing parts. We gotta get it. You can't put it together, Gunny, if it doesn't have the parts. And so it stayed that way. And then one day I get this deuce and a half comes going through the compound. I get a yell, get your sea bag together. Got my sea bag together. I threw it on that truck. I left. That Mighty Mite sitting there with the tire off of it. But the company clerk was on R&R. It was his rotation date, and because he wasn't there, I got it. So
Wow.
I got in that deuce and a half, and I went to Da Nang.
Did you fly home to Travis?
Oh no, Marine Corps. I was fortunate. We flew to Okinawa, and then from Okinawa we went up over Alaska, down the East Coast, down to Marine Corps Air Base El Toro.
Okay.
So I flew into El Toro. I guess if there were something that I would want to be on this interview, is that the serviceman that went to Vietnam would be sitting in a chair as I am today, as you are, okay? 5 days later, he would be assigned to a unit in country, could be carrying a weapon, could be whatever, 5 days later. But probably the more tragic part of that is that he could be there, and 5 days later you could be sitting back in that seat. But what's happened to you during that 12 months if you're Army, 13 months if you're Marine, okay? What happened to you during that time? You got accustomed. You were integrated into an entirely different lifestyle, entirely different circumstances. America per se was on the back burner. You adapted. You had a weapon. You had ammunition. Somebody was trying to kill you, okay? And you had buddies that you learned to depend on, that they learned to depend on you. There was that brotherhood. You didn't mess with anybody to a large degree, and no one messed with you. And I will say that there came to a point for many, because of the circumstances of what happened around them, they did not expect to come back alive. They did not expect to leave that country. They pretty much had determined that they were going to die there. Now when they got back 5 days later, they're back on the street. You have that you now are trying to incorporate into this America that is violent towards you, and that can't understand you. Your buddies, hey, where you been? I haven't seen you for a while.
You avoid it, did
Well,
you?
wait a minute. Have you ever come to the realization that you're not going to live? I don't think you have. Your family, have they, anyone in there? No. You're different.
Would,
Okay,
so you're,
don't know.
yeah,
Concluded.
okay, included, okay, okay.
I'll say,
So what-
thank him for the interview.
Okay.
His finish was much better than those goofy questions.
Okay,
That's
okay.
me.
All right, at this point, let me just ask, is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you'd like to, anything else that, as far as, you know,
I just appreciate your time. I appreciate you doing this interview.
appreciate?
And that's an open-ended question, and we could be here for another day or two. So
Okay.
thank you very
All right,
much.
thank you, Ben.
That's a good interview.
My epiphany in country came in late May, early June of '67. They called the 5th Marines in from the field, and they introduced the M16 to all of us, those of us in artillery and the grunts. And they just had so many of the weapons that they issued them to the grunts. They did not issue them to artillery. We kept our M14s. And a couple weeks later, there are these helicopters coming in, sometimes 2 or 3 at the same time, and people running out to them. And it was, I didn't know what the activity was over there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went over, and I found that eventually there were 32 Marines that had died in a hot landing zone
Mm-hmm.
because of weapons failure. And they had a wooden crate putting the weapons in, and I got to see those weapons and all kinds of disassembly. And I saw a young man that was a kind of a big guy, and he had blonde hair, and he just had his arms over his chest, and he didn't have a visible wound.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked like a fella I played football with, Kraut, German fella.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, at that point, from getting there in October of '66 to late May, that I had seen enough that I realized that all the Vietnamese in this country aren't worth that one man's life, that one's Marine life. I said that in my mind, and I went from being the patriotic American that was over there for duty, God, and country, to making certain that I got the hell out of there alive.
Mm-hmm.
And that was that's
The
where it
epiphany.
went. It was just, you did your duty, you did what you had, but your focus was on getting there, out of there alive.
Mm-hmm.
And
So this is what months was this?
late May, early June
Late May, early June
of '67.
of '67, and how much longer did you go, Ben, before you left?
I went till November 26th of that year.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be darned if the first mortar on another mortar barrage didn't land right in front of me, blew the sea bags over, ripped the end of my tent out just above my head. And 54 days, come on, you know? So,
And that was number 3, the most.
yeah.
So, Ben, do you recall the day? Was that the day that you were leaving that happened, or?
Oh, no, that was 54 days before I
Okay,
left country.
and then so do you recall the day you left?
I do. We were, because I was in charge of the motor pool, which really didn't exist, I had a little Mighty Mite that was assigned to me. And so I got my orders from out, kind of in the boonies, to go back to Battalion to rotate. So I am a salty dude at this by this time, okay? So I drive my Mighty Mite back, and I don't, I was in Hoi An, which I had no idea where Hoi An was at, which is now a major tourist town. And I had no idea in relationship to Da Nang, because I'm out here, but I'm going to make sure when my orders come that I'm getting from here to here. So how do I do that? I jack the front of that Mighty Mite up. I take the tire and the hub assembly off. I leave it. And here the gunny, who was he was a strange dude. Hey, put that together. The CO needs that. Sorry, gunny, missing parts. We gotta get it. You can't put it together, gunny, if it doesn't have the parts. And so it stayed that way. And then one day I get this deuce and a half comes going through the compound. I get a yell, "Get your sea bag together." Got my sea bag together. I threw it on that truck. I left. That mighty might sitting there with the tire off of it. But the company clerk was on R&R. It was his rotation date, and because he wasn't there, I got it. So
Wow.
I got that deuce and a half, and I went to Da Nang.
Did you fly home to Travis?
Oh no, Marine Corps. I was fortunate. We flew to Okinawa, and then from Okinawa we went up over Alaska, down the East Coast, down to Marine Corps Air Base El Toro.
Okay.
So I flew into El Toro. I guess if there were something that I would want to be on this interview, is that the serviceman that went to Vietnam would be sitting in a chair as I am today, as you are, okay? 5 days later, he would be assigned to a unit in country, could be carrying a weapon, could be whatever, 5 days later. But probably the more tragic part of that is that he could be there, and 5 days later you could be sitting back in that seat. But what's happened to you during that 12 months if you're Army, 13 months if you're Marine, okay? What happened to you during that time? You got accustomed. You were integrated into an entirely different lifestyle, entirely different circumstances. America per se was on the back burner. You adapted. You had a weapon. You had ammunition. Somebody was trying to kill you, okay? And you had buddies that you learned to depend on, that they learned to depend on you. There was that brotherhood. You didn't mess with anybody to a large degree, and no one messed with you. And I will say that there came to a point for many, because of the circumstances of what happened around them, they did not expect to come back alive. They did not expect to leave that country. They pretty much had determined that they were going to die there. Now, when they got back 5 days later, they're back on the street. You have that you now are trying to incorporate into this America that is violent towards you. And that can't understand you. Your buddies, "Hey, where you been? I haven't seen you for a while."
You avoid it, did
Well,
you?
wait a minute. Have you ever come to the realization that you're not going to live? I don't think you have. Your family, have they, anyone in there? No. You're different.
Would
Okay,
so you're
don't know.
yeah
Concluded.
okay included okay.
I'll say,
So
thank
what-
Thank him for the interview.
Okay.
His finish was much better than those goofy questions.
Okay. All right. At this point, let me just ask: is there anything else that we haven't talked about that you'd like to? Anything else that, as far as, you know?
I just appreciate your time.
Appreciate
I
it.
appreciate you doing this interview.
Appreciate.
And that's an open-ended question, and we could be here for another day or two. So
Okay.
thank you very
All right.
much.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, sir.
That's a good interview.